So you've heard the ideas. So now let's make them work. This is the practice exchange from concept to reality. It's part of the Business Architecture Forum broadcast channels. We are here to take ideas that you hear from events and boardrooms and figure out how to actually make them work within your organization. So today we are diving into the topic of digital twin of an organization, otherwise known as DTO, something that sounds really powerful and complicated, but it can be hard to apply depending on where your practice is at today. So if you've ever walked away from a session inspired but unsure on how to make it real, this episode is for you. All right. So my guest today is Gordon Cooper. He has been leading the charge in architecture for over 35 years, and his mission is to develop enterprise architecture as the cornerstone of industry. Gordon, welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And how are you today?
I'm doing great. For our audience, they won't know because it wasn't recorded, but this is our second recording. So this is going to be great. It's going to go smooth. All right. So digital twin of an organization. It's a mouthful. DTO at a high level. What is it, and what does this problem actually solve?
So if you look at the progression of what has been digital twins, where it starts with the very core component and then the next digital twin of the asset, which is the bigger system that component belongs to, and then there's digital twin of the process, which is how you actually make this asset. Yet the natural evolution of that would be digital twin of the organization, because that talks about all of the things that go into making whatever it is that you make. For instance, the version that I've been working on is really founded in value streams, so that you see how your company is going to create value, make money over time, and you decompose that to the core components. You understand how they're functioning, and you can get a past, present, future view of value creation.
Awesome. So let's say that I am new to a technology field and I hear somebody say digital twin of an organization, DTO. What should immediately come to my mind when I hear that?
Well, DTO is founded on the principles of business architecture. So if you think of it like this, you have an operating model, and this is what your company does. Those concepts are how your company operates, and a DTO is the automation or bringing to life of that operating model. So the first thing that you should think of when you're contemplating DTO is, what do we do? How do we make money? How do we create value? And then start backing into a more atomic level of where all of the pieces and parts that are you finally deconstruct down to the actual components to see how you do it, whether it's an application, a technology. Those things enable a capability, which in turn enable a process, which in turn enable a value stream. So it all builds.
Yeah. So maybe if I were to think about this too, just within my own practice and my own experience, DTO would be kind of putting all those different pieces together, understanding how our organization works, but not just at the surface level, like really what makes it tick. What are the gears and what are the things that are kind of driving behind this, right? So,
Absolutely.
why do you think, in your opinion, as a leader, as somebody in this field, why do you think this is getting attention?
Well, I've been, and like you said in the intro, I've been doing this a very long time. And the constant struggle that we've faced it as architects is, where's the value in architecture? A lot of time, the old statement, that architecture is the group that says no to everything, or they're always the most difficult to deal with because they're sitting off in a room theorizing about something. Well, this is actual tangible results. So I take all of that great architecture work that we've been doing for all these years, and then we layer on metrics and add dimensions for cost and risk and value, and we actually can make projections as to how valuable this thing that you're creating is going to be over time, and how to adjust things that aren't functioning optimally.
Yeah. So I think the word that comes to mind for me is like setting up a hypothesis of you think you're going to get this result, and then sort of testing out that hypothesis in a way that is not going to throw the organization in a disarray, but allow us to be able to experiment, run through different scenarios, and get a better picture of what that outcome might be. Do we think we're going to get what we think we're going to get? So, really proving out that hypothesis, right?
Absolutely. And in fact, it's being able to create a hypothesis based on pinpointed information that you have and then testing it out
Yeah.
without spending the money. I mean, how great would it be if I could say, I'm looking at investing $10 million in a program that's going to do X. But if I run this scenario and I see that my either the results are suboptimal or the things that I'm investing in are not actually contributing to the creation of value or meeting the expectation, I can save myself $10 million.
It reminds me of taking this out of the tech world for just a second. It reminds us of like the pop culture of expectations versus reality, right? When you go on Temu and you get those really fantastic deals, you've got in your mind what you think this thing is and what you think you're going to be able to do with it. And then when it actually arrives after spending the money on the actual item and shipping and customs, and you've sunk so much money into it, and you end up with what you thought was a dog pool, and you end up with like a little teeny itty bitty thing that is absolutely useless. So I think we can all relate to that.
Absolutely. In fact, a good analogy for that is Spinal Tap, the Stonehenge song, what they expected versus what they got, right?
That's right. All right. So expectations versus reality, right? Like I think we can all think about our organization within that context of being able to understand this digital twin of an organization. But let's get to the bottom of this, right? I, in theory, that sounds great. And it sounds beautiful and great. And if we're running with architecture and if we were able to have everything our way, it would be absolutely perfect. Perfection. But that's not where a lot of organizations are at. And that's not where enterprise architecture is at in most cases. So, where do you think, in your opinion, does it fall apart in real organizations?
In real organizations, it falls apart because of the lack of combination or coordination. Um, you walk into an organization, I do this every day, and they have some great information, some great data. They've done a lot of good work in a particular area, but translating it outside of that area to another area and making those connections, creating those relationships between the objects, that's where we're falling down, as well as being able to understand the connections that need to be made to get a particular result. I'll always use the Lego uh, analogy. Enterprise architecture, just like any other field, is like Legos. You have building blocks and you start constructing these building blocks. And the next thing you know, you've got a completely different object, but it's a complete object. It's made of a bunch of Legos, but it's how they fit together. That's how you get it. You can take those building blocks apart and build something completely different with those same Legos. So it's all about perspectives. It's all about outcomes. The components stay the same. There's only so many objects inside of an organization. Now, I know that could be millions, but still, it's how you assemble these objects. And I think a lot of the times we have trouble visualizing that outcome that we're trying to get to, which is why business architecture is so important in this, because business architecture is built around understanding the outcomes, the achievement of strategy that you've set, the strategic objectives. That's why it's so important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I always love the Lego analogy when we're thinking about how do we need to view the organization or what are things that are going to help, right? Because reusable building blocks is kind of the name of the game. What do you think people get wrong? I mean, you touched a little bit about teams that are really highly specialized and they're very, very T-shaped. So they go really deep within their own vertical, right? But in this day and age, especially with companies wanting to explore more AI capabilities, ChatGPT means absolutely nothing if it is only focused on a single topic. That's not where the value is. And I totally get that, right? So, what do you think practitioners or leaders are consistently getting wrong when they're thinking about architecture in the context of DCO?
They have to think outside of their own area. I mean, plain and simple. For so long, we've done architecture for architects, to where every deliverable we create is for another architect to consume. There's only so much scalability in that group, right? Because at some point, people outside of the group are saying, I don't even know what that is. What does it have to do with me? Yeah, it looks pretty. I could frame it and put it on the wall, but I don't know what to do with it. So once we start getting out of those boundaries and start dealing, I mean, one of the first things I did when I was in a previous life, I was working in enterprise architecture, but my first relationship that I built outside of architecture was with internal audit. It was, of course, it was self-serving because what better stick to have in an organization than internal audit? But also it helps them. You give them information that they can use to help remediate findings and to have a organization of information. Um, you said something really funny just now talking about AI and Chat GPT. Um, if you think about DTO, DTO is the representation of your enterprise in its entirety. You've got metrics from all of these components that are fed into this system. What better place to train an AI than on a repository that represents your entire business? I mean, does it get better than
That's
that?
no, not for me. That would be the ultimate dream, right? I'm sure we have listeners out there who are just like, can I take everything, all the goodness that we're doing in business architecture and feed it into our AI agents and create something that would be fabulous, right? Like that's the dream. That's what we would love. Of course, we have to talk about, did we just work ourselves out of a job? But I think it goes a little bit deeper than that, right? Because it's the intellectual human knowledge to put together these super abstract conceptual ideas together where we really have that human capacity to be able to do, right? Um, so now with that being said, of course, every organization is different, but we would all love to be that level 5 leading organization, super duper awesome. I mean, I think we even know you have experience working at Fortune 50 companies where their practices maybe aren't great in some of the areas, right? Like we can't be great at everything. So, what maturity level do you think is required as an architecture practice to be able to really enable and realize the value of DTO?
I've created maturity models in the past that have DTO as the top level, that level 5 maturity. The problem with that model is that it assumes that you are going to go through all the previous steps. And while you do need to go through those steps in a limited way, you don't have to put your entire organization on each one of those steps. You can build slivers of a DTO. In fact, I was talking to someone just the other day, and they were taking one slice of their business and creating a DTO just for that one slice. So, again, everything goes back to value. If I'm creating value for the company by having a digital representation of how we create value, I'm sorry for using that word so many times, but if you think about it, I could take a single value stream and take one stage of that value stream, decompose that down, and every component, I could improve each individual component, and it will improve that parent that it comes from, that value stage. Now, once I start building that out, I get the next stage, and then the next stage, and eventually I've got a full value stream. Once I've got one value stream, we'll start looking at another. It's a uh, exponential scalability because once you start working in this thread, you're putting together the components that are needed. Those same components are used in other areas. So you're naturally building out more and more as you go.
So that's super clever. I love that idea because Value streams are that end-to-end view of the value proposition, right? And it's really rooted on the idea that it takes a village. It takes the entire organization in order to deliver that value proposition. So maybe as a practitioner, even if our architecture practice isn't perfect, there's still things that are within an individual practitioner's control and scope that they can explore, value streams being a fabulous way of really pulling the thread on a specific outcome that would be relevant for either the scope or the area or the part of the business an architect might be operating in. That's super smart. So I'm sure some people are going to get super inspired here and be like, "Yeah, I'm going to jump in right away." What do you think practitioners consistently underestimate as they're getting started with this venture?
The hardest part of this is really knowing what metrics to tackle. Every perspective that you have to focus on a different set of metrics. And not just metrics, but KPIs, OKRs, all expected values, what you're actually getting. And then you start looking at historically, where am I baseline? So we can set realistic expectation. When we were developing this DTO, one of the things that we put together was a performance framework, and it really categorized the metrics. But it looks as though for every use case that you're applying DTO to, there's a little variation on the metrics. So you really have to engage with the business owner so that you can find out if I'm talking about value or supply chain, for instance. Supply chain has a different set of measures that are going to tell you whether it's effective or not versus maybe a specific value stream that you're looking at. So engage with the business, understand what it really takes to do that thing that you're modeling, and it will make your life much easier. But I think that's the part that's vastly underestimated.
Oh yeah, it's that connection, like, right? You're really building that connective tissue of the organization, which is why value streams are so powerful. And I think sometimes we get really stuck as an architect, architecture for architects, right? Is what you said. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Sometimes building those relationships takes a while. You got to build the credibility, the brand. People actually have to know who you are and what you do, which is a whole different
Absolutely.
conversation, right? But
Think about capability models. We've been preaching that for years, but decades. Have a capability model. All right. I've got a capability model. I've put it together, I've assembled it, but now what? Until I have the business engaged and to understand, hey, this is our representation of what you do, then if you have that relationship with the business, they can help you fine tune it, but then they can also provide all of that subtext underneath it to know why you have this representation and then what you can do with it once you've got it.
yeah. So let's talk a little bit because you were talking about how you had actually done DCO. What were some of your biggest lessons learned out of that?
Biggest lessons learned were integrations, getting the data that you need. So at first, again, I'll go back to the performance framework. The performance framework, initially, when we started this venture, we just thought metrics in general. There was a big pool of metrics, but you can't have a big pool of metrics. You have to have dimensions of a metric. I'll give you an example. If you're looking at a process, for instance, it's not just how fast I'm doing this process step. It's, well, how many transactions are flowing through it? What is the quality of it? What is the conformance to a standard? Or what's my quality control? There's a number of different measures that you have to accumulate to get a real view. The the biggest challenge that we met, and we met it head on, was they call it correlation versus causation. I can have a lot of metrics, and it sounds good. It looks really nice because I got a lot of numbers, but it's just like a data lake that's got just raw data dumped into it. It's old, it becomes a cesspool. DTO, you do not want to create just another data cesspool. So you have to organize these metrics in such a way that they're meaningful. And that was probably our biggest, that was a big challenge, and overcoming it meant a lot.
Yeah. So when you were getting started with that, did you have leaders or champions or advocates kind of helping you out, or did you have to forge your own path, or how did you get the sort of the room to be able to move forward with this?
Actually, it started with just a couple of us, a handful of us that had we've had this dream for some time. So once we and we have different backgrounds, some a little more technical than others, some a little more business oriented than others, some more go to market than others. But we all got together and we started thinking about what's going to be the most valuable to a C suite. Because again, we don't want to do architecture for architects anymore. We want to turn it into something that's valuable, solves the value problem for enterprise architecture, for one thing, because now we have a product that can be consumed by anyone in the C suite. It's a matter of perspective. And that's how we attacked it. And that's also why we started with value streams. What better place? It actually speaks to every C level executive.
That's right. I really, really like this idea of going back over to the value stream. I think it's in some organizations a really unrelated or underrated tool that is used to help bring perspectives together. I think a lot of groups really focus on those capabilities, right? But this day and age, outcomes are kind of where it's at.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything you see now.
Yeah.
I just did a bit for the federal space on a strategy to execution, and it is all about outcomes. Mainly because in the Fed space, you've got 4 years, and it's a very dynamic environment. New administration comes in, a new set of objectives, a new set of outcomes. But if you focus on those outcomes and gear whatever it is that you're doing towards outcomes, you will produce results and not be in limbo.
Yeah. I like this so much. So, okay, I'm super excited about the idea. I either am a business architect or I'm an architect in general. What's one thing I can start doing this week? It's Wednesday
Well, you
at
got
the
two
time of
days.
recording.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. So, in this next 2 days, what I would recommend is pick up the phone, start calling people, find out what data you have, what's high quality data that you currently have, and then start building a gradient map and saying, okay, I have this group of information that's very good. It's current, it's high quality. I have a couple of other areas where the data could be improved, but it's still usable. Let's start assembling these things, right? Let's get those things working together. Because if you think about it, decompose a value stream, a value stage, a capability, and beneath that are people, process, technology, information, right? Typical. I can start applying these data sets that I have that I know are valuable and then start producing results immediately because all I'm doing is making relationships with an end state in mind. That's where I would start. And you got 2 days to do it. So I'll give you some phone numbers, some people you can start calling and get to work.
That's a great first step, and it is truly as realistic as to like if you really were serious about wanting to get on it. Like these are tangible, pragmatic steps that people can do, right? And it's realistic, which is really, really important. Now, with that being said, sometimes we get overly excited with ideas, and we're going to talk to everybody because I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to call my best friend. I think you're in your example, right? You're highlighting this idea that we need to be talking more to each other because we have probably more things in common in terms of outcomes and value that we would like to deliver than we think. So we got to be able to ask. And it's really, really easy to go all in, right? And then eventually architecture becomes this super conceptual, over engineered thing that nobody wants anything part of, right? So what do you think in these 2 days, if I'm going to get started tomorrow or today, right, in a couple hours, what what should I avoid pushing too early?
I would avoid trying to do the entirety of something. So, for instance, you pick up the phone, first call you make is to asset management, and you ask them, hey, do you have an application portfolio? They say, yes, I've got a really good one. Perfect. My goal from that point is not to build out every application in a value stream. It's to then pick up the phone and talk to maybe the technology portfolio and pick a couple of critical applications that I know, because I've thought this through, associate to a value stream or a value stage. So I'm taking the components that I need out of these full portfolios or partial portfolios and building this model. So, and the next phone call may be to a business analyst and say, okay, how exactly do you do this step? And then they're going to put you in touch with the process owner, and they'll say, oh, you got a process map. So you're building it just a little bit at a time. Again, you don't want to take on more than you can handle, because what happens is you stall out. Then the people who are saying, oh, I thought you were going to create this magical thing that's going to solve all my problems. Instead, you've got a bunch of pieces of data and you're back in the same position you started.
Right. Yeah. I think the overselling or overpromising, I think hurts us always, because then we put ideas into people's head. And when we fail to deliver because we've underestimated the amount of complexity and some of the roadblocks and challenges, then that certainly hurts the reputation and the brand, right? Especially with enterprise architecture teams becoming, I mean, I suppose we're always in that flux of having to provide or demonstrate how we're actually providing value versus what we're really truly delivering. Speaking a digital twin of an organization, let's talk about that for
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
with that being said, right, like I'm trying to think of an architect who's working in this space, and they are, let's say, because realistically, a lot of architects are possibly doing a solutioning type work, right? We're indifferent, but that's kind of where some of our architects are at. Is there anything? What would they be able to do if their current job responsibilities are sort of slivered out in more of the execution body?
So I deal with a lot of solution architects, and there's a lot of, to your point, crossover with enterprise architects doing some solutioning, and then solution architects that are actually considered enterprise architects. It's, I mean, I started my career as a solution architect, so that I completely get it. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as you always marry this thing to a thing of value. So you never create a solution for a problem you don't have. Well, if you start doing it, you'll probably get shut down pretty quick because you'll lose funding.
Well, unless it's AI right now.
But well, we could go back a couple of years and say the same thing about blockchain, and
Oh, I
before that, it
know.
was about cloud, right? So
It's the hottest topic.
that's right. But if you always associate it with some valuable objective or some problem that the company's trying to solve, that's how you maintain relevance, and that's how you stay connected to the business. One of the problems that we had early on, in my career, was the separation of IT from everything else. And
Yes.
everybody always talked about misalignment between IT and the business. Well, the reason for that is you put IT in isolation and not understanding that technology is an enabler of the business. Instead, you told us to build a business called IT. Well, that's fine if you're an IT business, but most companies are trying to produce a product and IT
Yes.
enables it. So always keep that in mind. I mean, and that's actually going to lend to your view when you're creating a DTO.
That's such in my head, I was thinking to myself, yeah, that is kind of one of the challenges. A lot of organizations that I've had experiences with hold IT or technology teams as a separate part of the business, right? Well, in all actuality, we're one big happy family. No matter which technology team you're in or what that team may be called or who you report to, we're all part of a enterprise of that company, right? And we need to give ourselves a little bit more of a perspective on the idea that, hey, we're part of the business too. We're not
Yeah.
we're not just sitting out here. Nobody's subcontracting us to do what we need to do, right?
That's right.
Talk about causing fractures within an
Yeah.
organization. Um, but I think like even if you are working as an architect and maybe you're feeling a little limited or a little suffocated in terms of your scope, you can still do DTO type activities within the scope that you're in. So let's say, for example, architecture, you can do DTO for architecture. You can figure out where you're inserting in value to maybe those existing value streams, right?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
if you can't get somebody on your business teams to care right now, your CIO or your CEA or somebody on the IT leadership side could also care, right? It's valuable as well. So maybe thinking outside of the box too, in terms of for those who might feel that this would be out of reach for them. What do you think of that?
So it's funny you say that because I actually created a model um, based on COBIT. So COBIT 2019, it's was the most recent version at the time. I don't know if there's a newer one, but basically we took that model and converted it into an IT operating model. Then we add the metrics on top of it, and what do you have? You got a DTO of the IT organization, which is great for a CIO because a CIO can look at his organization and then say, okay, I see how we're doing portfolio management. I see the KPIs, I see the KPIs versus the metrics. I also see where it's connected to the other capabilities of
Yes.
my IT organization. So you build this really nice neural network and you put it in motion with the metrics that are generated, which you can pick up from CMDB or whatever it is that you're using to track these metrics. But I mean, that is an example of what you're talking about.
Yeah. No, I'm always a big fan of experimentation and R&D and figuring out like how do we eat that elephant or very very fast ways of being able to provide to show demonstrate value, right? And in a lot of it cases, a lot of our a few enterprise architects might be in that realm where they are very very much embedded within their technology organizations.
Yeah. Speaking about eating the elephant, I'll change that around and call it eating our own dog food. My company, when we were working through the initial phases of DTO, we decided to do our own company and start working through a single value stream, which was representative of the sales pipeline for a SaaS company. That's what we are, a SaaS software company. So we actually modeled the pipeline, sales pipeline, and all the different things that put you from stage to stage to stage, what the outcomes were, what they expected, and the this was before we even got approval to go forward. We had just started formulating it and started mocking it up. And we talked to the CRO at the time, and the CRO was like, "Wow, you could do this?" Yeah, we could. Well, then by all means, take a shot at it. And that was our initial authorization to operate.
I think that's just I love that story because that really hits a point, right? It doesn't need to be expansive, right? When we think about like what people should not do too early or what looks good enough versus over engineered, I think we often fall more towards that over engineered side, right? And then we're left thinking to ourselves like, well, shoot, DTO didn't provide any value for me. We tried it here and it absolutely failed. No, no, it's not that it failed. Maybe we need to relook at the environment in which it was trying to be deployed or lit up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, being architects, we thrive on complexity,
We
right?
truly do. We truly do. You should see all of the things that I have just to be able to do like our cleaning list or managing our property up north. Like it's yes, yes. There's lots of ability to simplify there. Um, so this is all fantastic, right? Like good practical takeaways for people who want to get started with this. So coming out of this conversation, what should people think differently or what should change if in their mindset when they're thinking about DTO?
The mindset change is that architecture and operations would no longer operate separately. And I'm guilty of this. I mean, I have always fought the battle, the ITIL battle of strategy, design, part of transition. Well, that's architecture. The other part of transition and operations, that's operations or CMDB. I have to put it in tooling concepts because that's my frame of reference. But instead of creating that line of demarcation, instead we're combining these two areas. So the whole paradigm shift is we're no longer operating separately. We're working together now. And we're combining all the great data that we collect on each side of this thing and turning it into something very valuable and very strategic.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think especially with AI technologies and this push towards utilization of AI, organizations that are working in their silos and reinforcing those silos are really, really going to struggle.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So the mind shift matters here, right?
It
Today we
does.
might be working within our own scope. We're not picking up the phone and calling, right? Like if I'm going to get started with this after this after this recording, right? I got to be able to pick up the phone. So expanding the current network, expanding outside of just like the general stakeholders, I think a stakeholder model and mapping would be really, really helpful here, or at least to be able to understand who those pieces or who those groups might be. That would be critical.
That you just made a statement that is hugely important. So I'm an architect. What is one of the last things that I ever even consider is people. People are, I mean, you hear every company say it, people are our greatest assets. Then why don't we model them into our architecture or put them as part of the DTO? Because if you did, then you can start looking at capacity planning, you can see performance, you can look at skills assessments. All of these things contribute to the performance of whatever it is that you do. And one of the dimensions that we added actually to the DTO that we built was people, because like they always say, capabilities are built to people, process, technology, and data, right? Or information. People conduct these things. The organizational units, the people, the role, the position. You can assign qualities to these things that are going to help you measure, and it's going to improve your accuracy tremendously. I mean, almost exponentially.
Right. And I think the other really important thing too, like lesson learned from my experience is it's really easy to work in my own dark room and do all the work, right? I can make the best drawings you've ever seen. But it needs that validation, it needs that understanding from other people. And especially if we're gonna be modeling outside of enterprise architecture or outside of the area we're at, right? You're gonna get better adoption if you've actually worked with those people and co-created that outcome or that thing with people. I think that's just such an important part to also remember.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, for more than one reason. The first reason, like I said, I need to know what this person does so I can see what their contribution to the value stream is. I mean, it's just there's hands on someplace that
Right.
people are providing. The other is the consumability of the DTO. What good is it if it's not consumable by the stakeholder that you're targeting? So, my understanding of what you do for a living or what you do for the company greatly impacts what I need to deliver to you, because if it's not in your frame of reference or seen from your perspective, it's not usable. So, and that's an architecture lesson all the way through any kind of architecture, because if I deliver very complex diagrams and you look at it and go, well, that's beautiful,
That's
I
great, but I don't know
failed.
what it means.
That's right.
I don't know how I'm gonna use it. All right, if you haven't heard that in your career as an architect, you must be doing something wrong.
That's right.
I'm
That
kidding.
means, yes,
I gotta make mistakes to learn, right?
absolutely.
All right. So starting right after this, I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm going to call people and to start making connections. I'm going to look at our information, our data, and figure out what we have, what's available, what's easy to grab. I'm going to grab my value streams and my value stages. And I'm just going to pick one that I think would be high value or most important or it could be a priority and start building that out. And then I can start to layer in all of the different pieces that we just talked about. That sounds easy.
It's 1, 2, 3, right?
It's one,
It's
two,
like
three, right?
a instant cake mix.
That's right. And some of the pitfalls I think is really important too, right? Like don't do it in isolation, right? You talked about and some of your lessons learned, right? Make sure that you're actually looking at that quality of data because sometimes it's just junk data. You're probably going to have to meet people.
You are. You're gonna have to become a social animal.
That is right. Oh, I'm an introvert through and through, so that always makes me cringe a little bit. But I'll do it. I'll do it because I like this work and I believe in it. That's great. All right. So, any last parting words then, as a practitioner who is interested in DTO or how it might look within their practice, or maybe just like if you were to give one piece of advice for somebody to do and then also to not do, what would be that?
Don't hesitate. Start. Start doing it. Have a vision for what you want this to look like. This is truly is an architecture exercise. They always say in architecture, you visualize the future and you build the iterative states to get to that future state. This is no different. Have the dream big, execute in small, measurable increments. That way, you're constantly building towards that end goal. And even if that end goal shifts just a little bit, you still have these building blocks that you're putting together and you're constructing systems and views and models that are valuable. It's just make sure you communicate the value. I know we're terrible at doing it because, to your point, we like to do our own thing and focus on our own stuff, but continually ask people, if I were to make something of value to you, what would it show me? Ask.
Right.
And I guarantee you, if you're promising to make somebody's job easier, they will not hold back.
That's exactly right. If you came into my place and you said, "Look, I'm going to be able to help you increase your confidence in some of your decisions you're going to make," I'm all in for that. I'm all
Absolutely.
in.
The funniest statistic that I've ever seen is, and I won't quote it because I can't remember exactly. It was the cost of bad decisions. McKinsey did a big study, and they said this is the average cost of bad decisions in a Fortune 500. It was some insane number, like $250 million a year. If you can just reduce a fraction of that, a 20% rule,
Yeah.
that's $50 million that you're saving your company in bad decision making at just a 20% improvement.
Oh, that's exactly right. Well, and then that's where actually I think DCO also I know we were getting close to closing out there, but just saying. This is I think where DCO can kind of help too, going back to how we started this conversation, which is sort of that hypothesis, that expectations versus reality piece, right? If you can start to pinpoint where those decisions are going to be tied to big dollar choices, that's valuable. That's just
Absolutely.
super valuable.
Yes, it is.
All right. Well, if you were trying to make this real, focus what you can apply, not just what sounds good in theory. This has been the Practice Exchange from concept to capability, part of the BAF broadcast. And if you found this content useful, feel free to share it with someone you're building your practice with or somebody you know might really enjoy this topic. Because remember, great ideas don't create impact, applied practice does. So we'll see you next time. Thank you, Gordon.
Thank you so much. Bye now.